me an opportunity to talk in this conference, and also special thanks to my friend Dr. Mahesh Mohan for the invitation. So I'll be discussing about some of the findings which we have made as part of our Arctic and Southern Ocean expeditions, which we have carried out along with the National Center for Polar and Ocean Research, Goa, under Ministry of Earth Science, Government of India. So that's what I'm trying to present here: invisible pollutants, fragile poles, and that is turning science into policy, which is the need of the hour, as we have been discussing right from the morning onwards. We are discussing about moving towards a sustainable future. So this presentation, since we are discussing about the silent contaminants or the invisible pollutants from the poles, this presentation will basically focus on two different types of pollutants, which is actually getting attention globally as far as the research is concerned, known from the poles and also from the other tropical and temperate regions globally. So these are actually, the first one is the microplastics, and the second one is the persistent organic pollutants. And you all know that what are microplastics, and both of them are actually silent contaminants. And when we think about this microplastics, actually it is not visible to our naked eye. And also for persistent organic pollutants, we need more complicated, sophisticated instrumentation techniques, as well as very precise sampling, as well as analysis, since we always detect them in very minute concentrations, maybe in nanograms or micrograms from the environmental system. And the microplastics are, as we all know, they are all tiny fragments, which is less than 5 millimeter in size. And they originate from different sources, and we know that globally we are discussing a lot about plastic pollution. And it's not about the microplastics pollution, because those which are visible to the human eye, that is the macroplastics. And we are finding it very difficult to replace plastics with any other materials which will be economically viable as far as the common man is concerned. And again, we have been discussing about the agricultural practices also, right? Ramaswamy sir has discussed something about this, and also morning also we have seen the talk from Dr. Nair. So that means our agricultural practices itself is actually creating a lot of pollutants, mainly in the form of this organic pollutants, which we use mainly in this crop control, and also as in the case of this removal of this harmful herbs and other things from, and also in pesticide, which will mainly come into the class of this pesticide type of compounds. And globally we call them as the persistent organic pollutants, and I think you must have heard a lot about Stockholm Convention and other things, which are trying to classify the persistent organic pollutants into different classes. Maybe you must have heard about the dirty dusters like the DDT and many other organochlorine variety of compounds which we use widely in agricultural practices. So what happens is that our poles, the polar regions, see both the South Pole as well as the North Pole, this is actually acting as a sink for the global contaminants. Since we are discussing about this sustainable practices, see what we are trying to generate in the lower latitudes, for example, what we generate in the tropical regions, and what we use in the tropical regions for this, either it is in the form of plastics or in the form of persistent organic chemicals. So whatever is getting generated in this particular lower latitudes are getting transported into the higher latitudes, that is to both poles, both to the South Pole as well as to the North Pole. And the polar regions are basically, it is acting as a sink for all these type of global contaminants. So you can see on this, you can see a diagram on this, maybe to the right side. So you can see that many of these persistent organic pollutants and other things, they are actually going through 4 different processes, and we call this as, scientifically we call this as a grass know what is grasshopper, it is an insect, and it has a special type of this legs for this jumping. So this chemical which is actually generated within the lower latitudes, they are also actually jumping like a grasshopper from the lower latitudes to both poles, Arctic as well as to Antarctica. And during this jumping process, actually you can call it as a four-step process. One is what we call as the cold condensation, which is mainly happening in the poles. See, once the chemical reaches the poles will act as a sieve. We know that the poles are already very cold in nature. So once the chemical get introduced into this colder region, so what happens is that this particular cold environment is actually facilitating its deposition there for a longer time. And again, there are two other processes which is mainly happening in the lower latitudes, which is facilitating the jumping of these chemicals from the lower latitudes to the higher latitudes. That is nothing but the global distillation. So global distillation means all these chemicals that we are generating in the lower latitudes, they are already volatile in nature. They have a tendency to get vaporized very easily. So what happens is that the particular temperature in that region is actually vaporizing the chemical, and that chemical is actually going through this process of this jumping, and then ultimately it is reaching to both the poles, and at the poles the cold temperature is actually facilitating its deposition in that particular region. And we always say that the poles are fragile in nature. We know that both Arctic as well as Antarctica, especially Antarctica, we know there is no human settlement. So what is there in the Antarctica is nothing but the research activities, and we know that we have around 100 research stations which is right now very active in Antarctica. And in Arctic there are human settlements also. But actually there are two processes which is actually making this fragile poles to more and more risky, moving it towards more risky nature. One is the long range transport of the pollutants, because I have already told you that most of these pollutants which are getting transported to the poles, they are having a volatile nature. So there is every possibility that they can travel through long distances. And coming to Antarctica, what is the second threat is that it is having more than 100 active research stations, and this increased scientific as well as the tourist activity to both Arctic as well as to Antarctica is actually posing a serious threat to both these regions in terms of this accumulation of these pollutants. So along with this, so we have been discussing about the organic chemicals and also the plastics, not only the microplastics, the macro as well as even the tiny version of microplastics, what we call as the nanoplastics. So what happens is that once the plastic is moving from the lower latitudes to the poles, what happens is that it is not only the plastic that is being transported to the longer regions. So along with the plastic, see if you look at the diagram on the right hand side, this plastic surface itself is having a lot of mechanism to absorb or by different other type of chemical interactions which is happening on the plastic surface and the chemicals with which it comes in contact. So what happens is that along with this plastic material, it also has got a tendency to transport various other contaminants into the region. So what happens is that the plastic itself is acting as a vector, and it will transport microorganisms as well as any other chemical contaminants which has got an affinity to stick onto the surface of this plastic. And we have several categories of POPs. We may not be looking into all the categories as part of our study, but we are focusing on some of the pesticides, then polychlorinated biphenyls, then byproducts like dioxins. And again, nowadays we are more into new varieties of chemicals, that is like polyfluorinated compounds, and also several varieties of flame retardants, which are mainly brominated compounds. So these are our own papers from Arctic. So that is, one is about the pesticides under the category of persistent organic pollutants from the Arctic fjords and lakes. And the other one is again on pesticides and microplastics, again from the Arctic system, which we have generated as part of the Arctic expedition. And this is our study area. This is actually the study area by the which is set by National Center for Polar and Ocean Research. part of the research quizzes which is being arranged by NCPR every year. So this was actually a comparison between 2 years, that is concentration of this organochlorine compounds between 2 years, 2 sampling years, that is 2018 and 2019, that is just before the COVID. So you can see the presence of DDT. So we know that DDT is actually globally it is banned. I think we started banning of this particular chemical in 1980s. But in this study, you can see the presence of this DDT, and then DDD and DDE. Actually, they are the breakdown products of DDT. DDT is the chemical that we have used widely. And when DDT persists in the environment for a longer time, it will break down into its metabolites, that is DDD and DDE. And along with that, there is also presence of this another chlorinated compound, which is also coming under the list of this dirty dozen chemicals as per the Stockholm Convention. So that means even the pristine environment like this, Arctic fjords are also showing the presence of this chlorinated pesticide category compounds as part of our 2 expedition. Now again this year onwards, we again started looking into, just as a comparison between this pre-COVID and post-COVID changes in the concentration, we started looking into the same variety, and I'm not presenting the results here. So this is a comparison between 18 and 19. And again, it is not only the DDT that we have looked into, or the chlorinated varieties that we have looked into. We have also looked into other varieties of compounds. We know that this diuron, again, it is also coming under the list of this dirty dozen chemicals, then chlorpyrifos, dicophol, and several other pesticide varieties were detected from the Arctic region as part of these 2 observations which were carried out in 18 and 19. And again, what we did is that we did another analysis in 2023, and this year also, last month also, we have completed 1 sampling. We are awaiting the result. So in 2023 also, if you look into the concentration of this DDT varieties, you can see the presence of DDT and its metabolites still from the Arctic region. And another interesting observation that we could see in 2023 is that a new variety of compound, that is the last one, the green one on that bar diagram, you can see that is called diuron. And actually, when we started banning the organochlorine compounds in 1980s, what happened is that we started promoting organo-amino compounds, because we are thinking that this amino compounds, compared to the organochlorine compounds, the organo-amino varieties of these pesticides, they were found to be less harmful, or we were not actually having so many studies related to the environmental effects of these kind of compounds, and we started widely using this organic amino compounds as pesticides. So this diuron is coming into that class of compound, organo-amino compounds, which was actually widely used not only in the less developed countries, and also in this developed countries were also using this compound for this in the farming of this wheat and other varieties of crops. So our indication was that then the same experiment, or what you call the same analysis, or the analysis of the same kind of compounds we did in our Southern Ocean expedition also. You know that Southern Ocean is the coastal Antarctica region, and we can also call it as the Antarctic Ocean. So India is also having research stations in Southern Ocean. We have the permanent research station in Antarctica. In addition to that, we are also having cruises in the Southern Ocean for this sampling. So what we observed is that in the Southern Ocean, the coastal Antarctica, there also you can see the presence of this chlorinated pesticides like metabolites of DDT, other chlorinated pesticides, and also you can see the presence of this amino varieties of these pesticides from Southern Ocean also. So one important aspect that we have to be very careful, since we are discussing about the sustainable practices or moving towards a sustainable future, is that all these varieties of compounds, whether it is DDT or its metabolites or other organochlorine varieties of compounds or organo-amino type of compounds, where it is coming in the Arctic and Antarctica is that it is getting originated from the lower latitudes, and from the lower latitudes, as a result of this evaporation, distillation and this grasshopper effect, it is getting deposited into the polder region. So what happens once it is getting deposited in the polder region, there is no mechanism to eliminate it from that particular polder environment, because it has to get warmed and then only it can get back into the atmosphere, or it can get transported to other regions. So there is a trapping mechanism which will deposit the chemical into that particular port region. So that is a very important aspect, or that means how careful we have to be, or how responsible should be our agricultural practices or any other practices where we are using this wide variety of chemicals without any proper control mechanisms. And again, now the entire world is looking into the harmful effects of this amino varieties of compounds. Up to 2023, we are thinking that all these amino varieties of this herbicides or pesticides that we are using widely is comparatively harmless. So one thing is that since in our study, it is also published also, we could detect the presence of this diurone, which is an amino variety of herbicide. So what happens is that this diurone itself, it seems to be harmless. But what happens when it is there in the environment for a longer period, it will degrade into another compound. It will degrade into another metabolite. We call it as the dinitroaniline. And this dinitroaniline is found to be very harmful. It is found to be having carcinogenic nature, and also it is found to be very harmful to algae and other aquatic plants. So that is about the persistence of these kind of chemicals into the colder environment. Now, so these are some of our publications from Southern Ocean also. Whatever we could observe in terms of this organochlorine pesticides and microplastics or any other contaminants from the Arctic and also from the Southern Ocean, we try to publish it as early as possible, because we are continuously into this monitoring of these kind of pollutants on a yearly basis as part of this cruises to both regions. Now again, what we did is that we did some work on this microplastics, presence of this microplastics from both these Arctic as well as from this Southern Ocean region. So what happens is that you can see the images. So these images are actually the microscopic images of this. These are the polymer spectra of this corresponding microplastics. Since you are a mixed audience, I'm not going into the polymeric details, but you can see the different shapes of this plastics which we have observed, microplastics which we have observed as part of this, our observations from this, both from the Arctic and also from this Southern Ocean environment. So what we have observed is that we have different types of microplastics from both Arctic and Southern Ocean, and in our observation, the fiber type of microplastics, fiber which is mainly used in this textiles and also in this fishing activities, and also many of the plastic polymers that we use are in the fibrous form. So most of these areas were found to be having a very high concentration of this fiber type of microplastics, and also followed by the fragments and the film type of plastics. And again, we also have a small percentage of this bead variety. So that is, microplastics are also there in bead shape, which we widely use in our cosmetic products. See, for example, in our face wash and other things that we scrubs and other things that we use as this beauty care products, they contain this microplastics in the bead form. So that means all these, whatever we are discharging into the immediate environment, is actually getting carried into the water bodies, and ultimately it is reaching into the oceans. And from the oceans, even though it is there in the tropical environment, different types of this ocean circulations and currents are carrying them into the remote areas, and then even into the pristine environments like Arctic and also Southern Ocean. And these are again different varieties, the shapes and the colors of these microplastics particles that we could observe. You can see how the fiber will look, microscopic images of this fiber variety of microplastic, then how the fragments will look, how the beads will look, and also we have clusters of this microplastic. So these are different observations, and depending upon the site, it will vary. The color, the shape, and many other things will vary. So, and these are also the different spectroscope, polymeric, the FDR images of this different varieties of plastics. I think you must be knowing some names, common varieties of plastics that we use in our daily life, polyethylene, then PET, polyethylene terephthalate, then polyamides, and then polyurethane, like that, different types of polymers, which is very common in our daily use. So these polymeric varieties are actually observed even from this pristine regions like Arctic and also from this coastal Antarctica. So then here comes the science in this, how we can integrate or how we can integrate our observations, see our observations both from the Arctic and also from this Southern Ocean into policy development. So we have seen that even Indian government is also pumping a lot of money into polar research. We know that we have 2 permanent research stations in Antarctica, Maitri and Bharati, and also we have that we started Antarctic research in 1980s, and we started Arctic research in 2008 with the establishment of the Himadri station in the Arctic. So that means we are also pumping a lot of money, and one of our major focus area is looking into this climate change issues in the Arctic, and also looking into different types of this environmental pollution which is happening both in the Arctic and in the Antarctica, and also we are looking into the biodiversity aspect, how the climate change is affecting the biodiversity of both these regions. So as part of the Indian research, not only as part of the Indian research, because globally a lot of people are working in both areas, both in Arctic as well as in Antarctica. So we could see or we could detect the presence of many of these harmful varieties or harmful chemicals, whether it is pesticides or whether it is any other type of emerging contaminant or microplastic or heavy metal. So people have started detecting all these from the snows and then from the sea ice. Then if it is in the Arctic, it is the polar bear, and if it is in the Antarctic, it is the penguin. So that means we are just reporting the concentration, or even though it is in a very low level, we are detecting the presence of these type of varying type of emerging pollutants from both these regions. So as part of these observation, we have 2 major groups which are actually focusing into both regions. One is AMAP, which is Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, and for the Antarctica we have the Scientific Committee on this Antarctic Research, which is SCAR. So this, if you go through the website of this AMAP, you can see a series of reports which is actually concentrating on the presence of different varieties of pollutants from different regions in the Arctic. And our research, India's research, is also a part of all these type of reports. So what happens, so that means all these reports are actually being taken care by AMAP, then from the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, and also we have the U-Arctic, which is actually a network of different countries, which is a part of the Arctic Circle, and we have a common research forum working as part of this U-Arctic. And your university, Mahatma Gandhi University, is a member of this U-Arctic, and our university is also a member of the U-Arctic. So that means what all research findings that we make as part of expeditions, we have a forum to present these research into these committees. So that means they are incorporating all these points into their reports or into their yearly publications. So that means that is made for the policy developments as part of this protecting this Arctic as well as Antarctic. And we also know that we have the Stockholm Convention, and Stockholm Convention banned several persistent organic pollutants. But now what we have is that we have new varieties of these chemicals. See, for example, the organoamino compounds and many other new class of chemicals which we use in the lower latitudes, which has to be brought into the attention of this Stockholm Convention, and it has to be annexed, or it has to come as an annexure, that is for the additional banning of these type of chemicals in the subsequent years. So the way forward is that, one important thing that which is actually needed for this Arctic and Antarctic research is that we don't have a lot of people working on these poles. And working in this regions, actually, that is very expensive. We know that India is also spending a lot of money for this polar research. So that means only a selected group of people are actually getting an opportunity to work into the Arctic and Antarctic environment. And one thing is that it demands, protecting these 2 regions actually demands a strong communication, collaboration, as well as commitments. And that means it has to involve both the language of science and also the language of this policy. So one thing we are very happy is that in 2022, India government has come up with the Arctic policy. So that India government is actually also giving courses to the Indian university students about the Arctic, and also we are trying to give something about the government's Arctic policy, so that how responsible we should be while how responsible we should be in the lower latitudes with the use of these chemicals, whether it is for industrial purposes or whether it is for agricultural activity, and how it is going to affect the higher latitudes or how it is going to affect the poles. So that means these kind of activities we are also trying to give to our students. So we are also running one course on this particular online program for understanding the Arctic, the climate and the need for environmental protection. So that means we are trying to educate the youth the need for protecting these two pristine ecosystems, because once the ice starts melting, so we know that the effects are going to be very serious, because it will bring in a lot of trapped contaminants which is already trapped in the system, and also it will bring in a lot of pathogens also. That means we are just going to face a lot of issues with the melting of this ice as part of this climate change issues. So our goals may seem distant, but the fate is actually tied to ours. So I thank my team, myself and my students have been a part of several expeditions to Arctic, that Southern Ocean, and recently we started our expeditions to Antarctica also. So we thank MOES and CPR as well as our university for all these opportunities. And what I would like to conclude is that these invisible pollutants, they remind us that what happens anywhere on Earth matters everywhere. So protecting these fragile poles is not just a scientific responsibility, it is actually a global responsibility. And turning science into policy is not only about understanding the pollutants, it's about ensuring that invisible threats receive visible action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gopinath, for that extremely insightful presentation. And I might add that I don't know whether you've heard of this documentary which came out in 2015 called A Plastic Ocean. Have you ever seen that? Have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah. This is a documentary which is freely available online. If you need to have more explanation of this extremely important subject, A Plastic Ocean is a documentary to look at. And now I invite students to ask any questions that they may have to Dr. Gopinath.
Thank you, Professor Ainu, for your excellent presentation. Amino compounds, as you know, highly carcinogenic, and organomercury compounds are equally neurotoxic. So if such current is contaminating the ocean stream, it will definitely affect human folk, etc. Can you comment on this?
Yes, sir. You are just organomercury compounds. No?
Mercury and amino compounds.
Yeah. Actually, organomercury compounds, we have not looked into the presence of organomercury compounds. I think Mahesh is doing a work on mercury. Mercury from the Arctic is actually done by Dr. Mahesh. We are looking into the variety of this pesticide category, and there comes this organo-amino compounds like diol. So actually, the work related to this organo-amino compounds from the global oceans, not only from Arctic, from the global oceans, I think it started coming as publications only in 2023. So that is, till then we are not worried about the organo-amino compounds, because amino class of compounds, as you know, we always think that it will degrade very easily compared to the chlorine varieties of compound. That is actually a fact. It will degrade, and to some extent it is water soluble also. But the thing is that that compound, the parent compound, is not that much a harmful compound. But if it is there in the system and if it is getting a chance to degrade, it is becoming nitroaniline. So that is found to be more dangerous, because just like metabolites of DDT like DDE and DDD are still there in the system. We banned DDT in 1980s, but even if you look into the presence of this DDT, it is there in the poles. The presence is detected. One issue is that it is not a recent input of DDT, because whatever is getting transported, it is getting tracked, and whenever it is getting a chance, it is getting reintroduced into the system by melting. And as you have pointed out, whether there will be a chance of trophic level transfer, that is what you are asking now, that is entering into the human systems. So DDT, the presence of DDT is actually there in the Arctic in the higher trophic level. In the Arctic, it is up to the polar bears. Maybe if you look into the human blood reports related to the human blood and other things, it is there reported from the Arctic. And in Antarctica, it is even reported up to the penguin level, that is the highest trophic level as far as the Antarctic is concerned. But in both regions, if we have reports of this presence of these type of harmful varieties of compounds within the indigenous community also. But I have not seen the papers related to this amino compounds from the indigenous people of Arctic, because now people have just now started looking into the new varieties of compounds. Now the new varieties will come, it will come as annexures in Stockholm additions. So that means now every year new and new varieties of compounds are getting recruited. And we also don't know about the chemical nature of all the varieties of these pesticides or herbicides which is being used, especially in the Asian countries. They have different technical names. So that also is another issue, just to get an idea about the exact chemical composition. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am, for your informative presentation. In your presentation, you said we have to be controlled in using pesticides, and you say just like a word, control use.
Yes.
What does it mean? And I want you to connect with the reality. For example, take large mechanized farming, which use chemicals, pesticides, with using helicopter spray or with different types of highly using. Connect with that one, your answer, possibly. Thank you.
So one thing is that we cannot completely ban all the chemicals that we use in agricultural practices globally. Even if you ban, people will use it, because I think that even in some places even if DDT is being used, even though it is banned, maybe under a different technical name or something like that. And another alternative is that we can go for this biopesticides, because economically it is not that much viable, that is for a particular farm person to use, because many of these biopesticides are found to be very expensive also, and some are actually not that much expensive. That is the only alternative. And the other thing is that we should know about the exact chemical composition, and also some kind of this experimental trials and other things. There should be it should be done globally, so as to prevent the global transport of these kind of contaminants. Because one issue that now we are facing with this climate change issue is that if you don't look into the exact chemical composition, the volatile nature of the chemical that you are using in your farm, there is every possibility that with this global warming and other things, and with the changes in this ocean currents and other patterns, it may get transported into other pristine environments also. So this requires a global effort, a global coordinated effort to control the use of harmful chemicals. And so that is what we are just trying to integrate the science with the policy globally.
Any other questions? So I think, Dr. Gopinath, from what you've said in your presentation and your answer to the questions, that your opinion on the outlook of the state of the oceans is fairly bleak. Am I right, Dr. Gopinath? I was asking you whether your opinion, and I see from your presentation and your response to the questions that your feelings towards the future of our oceans is pretty bleak. I mean, if we can't enforce banned chemicals, if we need to get a global agreement on banned pesticides, then the chances of that happening are fairly slight, which doesn't look very good for the oceans. Would you agree?
Yeah, we cannot ban all the chemicals all of a sudden, but we should have an idea into, because in local markets, see, if you look into India, in local markets we use a variety of chemicals for this agricultural practices without knowing the exact chemical formula or chemical nature like that. So there should be some kind of regulations or this checks on these kind of agricultural practices, because without knowing the exact nature and other things, and if you are using it in an irresponsible manner, it is going to have a very serious effect. So I can just talk only about India, so that means maybe we don't know what is happening in the other countries also, but it may happen globally because people use a variety of chemicals which may be very cheap, and then for immediate results and other things. We have these kind of practices. So if we are not controlling that, that means it's not only like detecting the presence of the chemicals, it's how it is going to affect the human health also, because we have increased reports of this cancer in India, not only in India, globally. That is one fact, is that this excess use of these chemicals in different forms, knowingly or unknowingly.
We have in Europe we have exactly the same problem, and in fact the European Union keeps on promising to ban the neonicotinoids, I think it's called, the chemicals that are very harmful to bees. And every year the review comes up, literally they then grant it another year license. And with pesticides, I'm afraid the pressure from the big global corporations, like in Italy we have Ferrero that makes the notorious chocolate spread, and they are encouraging farmers to use pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, and it's, I'm afraid, relentless. So, thank you very much anyway. Thank you.
We now have the honor of presenting a token of appreciation to Professor Gopinath. I request Dr. James P. Graham, Chair of the session, to kindly present it.